My name is Ruffin Rhodes.
My name is Renee Webley.
My name is Chad Jones, and I have been a licensed architect for 6 years.
12 years.
28 years.
I am Black.
I am professional.
And I'm an architect, and it all matters.
And it all matters.
And it all matters.
Before we get started, we'd like to thank Rhodes and Brito Architects and Interior Contract Services for their sponsorship of today's event. These contributions will go toward future scholarships for the Black Architects in the Making Orlando chapter. For our second episode today, we've decided to venture to the periphery of architecture and explore our neighbors in the AE industry. Today, we will discuss the importance of people of color supporting one another and through a variety of topics. We'll look at the way that we are sometimes alienated from one another and the disconnect that occurs within our profession, and we'll further understand ways that we can make support more accessible. This conversation takes place through the lens of 4 very accomplished professionals who have joined us today to explore the importance of interdisciplinary networking. Our goal here is to create a safe space for people of color in the industry to feel empowered by connection. This platform offers the opportunity for our panelists to speak to their real-life experiences. Now let me introduce you to our 4 panelists. First and foremost, help me in welcoming Chad Jones. Chad Jones is a senior associate and project architect at Harvard Jolly Architecture. He's been a licensed architect for 6 years, and he also works as an adjunct professor for Valencia College and serves as the school board for Panelist Micro School. Hi, Chad, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining us here today.
Yeah, happy to be here tonight.
Next, we have Miss Marilyn Russell. From managing her own residential design firm to creating office spaces, Marilyn has been designing interiors for over 12 years. She's currently employed with Baker Barrios, and while she's crazy about interior design, some fun facts about Marilyn is that she loves to play video games, and you can catch her on bustling Los Santos, Grand Theft Auto. She also enjoys spending time outdoors with her camera, and while she's deathly afraid of heights, she loves the window seat on the plane. Welcome, Marilyn.
Thanks for having me, Briana.
Thanks for being here. Next, we have Miss Nicole Popovich. Nicole is a designer and founding partner at DAP Design. Nicole's work experience includes higher education, corporate master planning, residential, small-scale commercial, sports, and entertainment. You can see that Nicole is a busy woman. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least is Mr. Raymond Nurse. Originally from the Caribbean island, Barbados, he completed his undergraduate studies in Jamaica, and after a gap between studies, chose to move to America in 2017, where he pursued double graduate degrees in architecture and urban design at Iowa State. He is presently practicing architecture at HHCP and is working towards licensure. As the rest of us do, Raymond would like to also note that he misses life pre-Rona, as he calls it. Welcome, Raymond.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us. And so here we have our 4 panelists for the evening, where we will be discussing the support that we believe is necessary for people of color in our industry, especially interdisciplinary support. So I'd like to start us off by asking the first question to Marilyn. And Marilyn, I'd like for you to describe to us, what does support actually look like to you?
Thank you. The support is something that you can get, within or on the outside of your, environment, your company. One of the biggest supports that I received was actually from Kelly Addison, and I believe she was a panel member on your very first show. And I met Kelly when I had my own interior design firm, and she represented a vendor, and we were just talking, and I was in the position of wanting to leave my firm but not knowing what the next step is. And so she actually, after our conversation, she actually helped me to get into the last architecture firm that I was. And, that was, it just all happened just through a conversation, and I thought that was really great because that actually set me on the path to where I am now.
That's
so.
amazing. So for those
Yeah.
of you who don't know, Kelly Addison was on our first episode as a panelist, and she is an architect. And so while Marilyn is doing interior design, she's working for an architecture firm. And you should also follow her on Instagram because she has some pretty amazing work there, outside of her firm. But so you spoke about the support you received from a peer, and Nicole described for us earlier this week in our conversations how she leans on family or friends who are also in very competitive or demanding industries. Nicole, can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think with regards to architecture and our education, we were asked during our education to look at a concept and an idea from varying perspectives. And I kind of took that idea and that resonated throughout kind of the edges of my life. So when I'm in kind of challenging situations professionally, I lean very heavily on my family members. My sister is an attorney and also an entrepreneur. And so she's in an industry that's extremely competitive, extremely challenging, and she's asked to go above and beyond at all times. And I find solace in that, in the fact that I can share my experiences with her. And given that she's in an industry that's just as competitive as architecture, maybe if not more, she's able to provide a perspective on kind of race-related questions that I think helps me during kind of challenging endeavors.
I love that. So we've talked about leaning on our peers, we talked about leaning on our family. And while Raymond, I didn't necessarily gear this toward you initially, I know that you spoke about the support of a firm when you were in the hiring process. Can you kind of describe for us what made you select certain firms versus another, because of the support that they offered you during the hiring process?
Yeah, so for me, it was an instance where I was looking for some work around the same time last year, actually. And there was also some plans that I had made to attend the National Organization of Minority Architects Conference. And that was supposed to be the second week of October. And so whilst selecting a firm, obviously you want to ensure that there's a catalog of work there that you're interested in. And one thing that was one of my personal requirements would have been picking an environment that they're allowing me to attend the conference, because it was something I had planned prior to actually starting work. And so where I'm at now, HHCP, they said, well, we're going to try to get you in before the conference started. And I was there, I think I worked 1 week, and then I was allowed to go to the conference, and obviously without pay. But I was fine with it because it's like, this is something that I was looking forward to for the entire year. And so we have our general meeting, and I remember the next general meeting in November when they were doing the staff welcome, I'm thinking to myself, like, where's my welcome? And so there was word on the street then that, oh, he's the guy that was in work the first week and off the second week in a jovial manner. And so for me, it was a matter of not just looking at an architecture firm, but also knowing that there are certain things that I need for my personal development and professional development to continue on. And so that was a big part of support for me at the firm.
I think that's very important. If I could quote Mr. Craig Eckhart, he says that no man is an island. And in our conversations this week, he was very poignant about that. But I think these examples of having peers and family and organizations or firms that actually support us in what we're passionate about and understanding that diversity is important helps us all move forward. And so for our second question here, Raymond, your history studying undergrad in Jamaica and then transitioning to America, specifically in Iowa, I'm wondering, prior to moving to America, were you aware that there was a lack of diversity in our profession? And could you offer some insight, to your experience?
So in all honesty, I wasn't aware that there is a lack of diversity because I'm from a region that is a Black majority. And so it wasn't something that would have been on my radar at all. And so it's only when you get on the ground and you start your studies that you're like, whoa, there aren't a whole heap of people that they look like me. And so it's a challenge within the student aspect of getting your education. And then there's a challenge in the profession where just knowing other people who you could kind of like lean on for mentorship or advice in terms of the do's and the don'ts, that definitely wasn't there. And so for me, I tried to, while I was at Iowa State University, I tried to be in a position where like I'm a bit older than most of these students, even in grad school. And so I wanted to kind of impart as much knowledge as I could, so they would have a better idea of going forward, what are some of the challenges they're going to find in the profession and how to kind of manage and to deal with them accordingly.
Now, Chad, you spoke to us about how you were more aware of this lack of diversity at the collegiate level. You said, your experiences there, it was emphasized when you were in studio or when you were presenting work. Can you talk to us about that experience for you?
Yeah, I think growing up, I think early on, I knew I wanted to be an architect. That's something that I realized I wanted to do from a very young age. I didn't realize the lack of diversity, and I guess maybe I should have, until I was actually in school. And seeing, my classmates, and everybody was nice and everything, but there was a part of me that was always a little uncomfortable, not just, because of the lack of diversity, but lack of, diverse backgrounds. And I grew up in a different background than a lot of the students I went to class with. So there was always a little bit of, me trying to do things that made myself comfortable in that setting. And one thing for example, one of the things I tried to do that kind of set me apart was I did just dress up Friday. And so I would just randomly dress up and go to class, just something to feel a little bit different. So it's something that's kind of, again, and we're having this forum because it's still an issue in the professional environment. So it sticks with you. Over the years, I've learned to deal with it, but I think I was really aware in that setting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I think too, I had excuse me, in terms of my upbringing and my education, the majority of the time I was the only Black person or one of two or three in the room. So in terms of the lack of diversity in architecture throughout, when I was looking at a career to choose, that wasn't something that I had looked into, although I should have. But I think there's, Chad, you mentioned something about it's something that we have to deal with, and it is, but I do think it's also something that we can talk to together and kind of work through. And I've been fortunate to, have people around me that are interested and willing to have the discussion on the lack of diversity. And I think that's important for professionals to kind of test the water and see what kind of conversations are my peers and the people around me willing to have, and is it something that can be meaningful and fruitful, so that the lack of diversity in architecture is a discussion point for everybody,
Right, and I think
And interior design.
and
interior design and engineering. And
Don't leave me out.
I think from that perspective, and Nicole, to your point that you made earlier, I get inspired when I talk with a lot of my friends from college in the same setting, and a lot of the same professional professional environments where they're, still facing that lack of diversity, I get inspired when I talk to them and, hear their experiences and how they're able to overcome, and they're at the point now where they're, a lot of my friends are making partner, or, that type of thing. And so that's very inspiring. And so seeing everyone else's struggles and how they've overcome it, that inspires me in my work that I do. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think sometimes as designers, it's easy to overlook the ways that our designs might be skewed based on our own lens or our own biases.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we may have our own experiences, by adding diversity to our firms and the cultures at our firms, we have a better vision. I know in an instance that I had while working professionally, we were going after a project, and there was minority participation required, and it was in a minority community. And in a previous firm, we put together a marketing package that had entirely white people on all of the imagery. And so I had to kind of pull, my superiors aside and say, I know we're going after this project, but the saddest part was that wasn't actually indicative of our firm culture. We had a lot of diversity, but the marketing material was outdated, or it just showed, certain executives. And I think that sometimes we're just not fully aware of the way that our reality can be skewed, by our own personal lens.
Exactly.
And so the next question I have for all of you may seem a bit controversial, because I think the point of us all meeting here today is really to have difficult conversations. I think the only way we move forward in dealing with race issues in our nation and in our profession is by addressing them. And so while this conversation or this question might be a little bit uncomfortable, I think we have to start at being uncomfortable, and then we can all start to learn from one another and develop empathy and understanding. So Chad, I'm going to gear this one toward you, but I'm curious, have you ever felt alienated due to your race, in the instance like I just spoke about, where maybe the imagery didn't reflect, people who look like you?
Right. And I think, to your point and your example that you gave, I think it comes from a lack of self-awareness sometimes. And it could be well-intentioned or well-meaning, but, from the eyes of someone from, in a minority perspective, it tends to be, okay, well, you didn't think this through. And an example that I had early in my career, we were going after a project for a district, and that district minority participation was very important to them. So, it was part of the judging criteria. And so I didn't have a lot of experience at that point. And, I was added to the team, but I was added to be, and this is direct term, was the minority enforcement officer. And that, at the time, it's, even now, it still kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's something that's, I carry with me through my career. But I think I made the decision that, the last forum, Ruffin Rhodes was on, and, as you know, he's the partner of Rhodes and Brito. And one of the things that I took from him, and something that he said at the last thing, is that, he positioned his firm to not be the minority firm, but to be a competitor with some of the, the big names, and something I've seen them do and do quite successfully. And so that's something I've tried to embody in my own professional career, is that, I'm not going to be, viewed as a token. I'm going to be viewed because I'm very, very good at what I do. And so that's something that I take to heart, and I still, like I said, it's still a little bit of a sticky point with me, but it acts as motivation as I move forward in my career.
Well, I think we can all kind of agree that we don't even know what is a minority enforcement officer. Did you know what that role meant?
Yeah, no, I think whatever it was, I wasn't very good at it. So.
Well, I think another thing we need to understand collectively is that just because we embody diversity doesn't mean we necessarily want to champion it for the rest of the world, and that this is a collective effort, and that, you know, even people who don't look or act or have experiences that we do should also be engaged in participating in creating more diverse cultures and supporting, you know, your diverse peers. So does anyone else want to speak on a time when maybe they felt alienated in their profession or in school?
I could tackle it a little bit. So alienation, like, is the default, and it's tough to say, but that's our reality. And so for me, when those times come up, I lean heavily on those who are within my support group. And because, like, there's a lot of sense in being stronger together. But one instance that rings out for me is during one of my interviews last year. And so here I am sitting across the room from a gentleman, probably in his mid-60s or so. And so he is presenting his firm to me, and he says, like, his catalog of work includes a lot of work in Middle Eastern territories. And so he was looking at a multi-family dwelling, and he was saying, well, we've done this master plan, and included in the master plan, because it's in a Muslim region, included in the master plan is a mosque. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's amazing. And so then it takes a turn down a way I was not prepared for. And so he goes on to say, he's like, and like, it's a very impressive thing to have the ability and to have the permission to design a mosque, because this is something that infidels aren't allowed to do. And so, like, I mean, I don't recall if my jaw dropped to the floor or not, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, there are so many different things just incorrect with this. And so, like what Chad is saying, there's a level of sensitivity and a level of empathy that is lacking when you can feel comfortable enough to sit across the room from a complete stranger and say, well, you know, like, the default Muslim thought process is that everyone who is a Muslim is an infidel. And so there are a lot of these moments where, like, I am in a place now where I am a lot more comfortable saying, just pause a second. I think that, I mean, I'm not Muslim, but that's a very inappropriate thing to say. And hopefully, I mean, like, I ended up not working with the lad, but thank God. But like, the reality is we need to be in places where, and spaces where people understand that we're not all cut from the same cloth. And that's something that really should be celebrated, as opposed to kind of just treated as this divisive mechanism for whatever means are the agendas at the table at the point.
Briana, before we move on, can I give a positive example of the alienation, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think, you know, to kind of put a positive spin to that, one of the first projects I worked on was in a traditionally Black neighborhood. And I know, you know, going to some of the planning meetings early on in the process, the neighborhood was very outspoken about, you know, the outsiders coming in and doing what they want and imposing their will on the neighborhood. And so, so that was something that was, you know, I observed and I said, okay, this is going to be a very controversial project. But as the project went on, I would walk around the project, or, you know, I have meetings, and, you know, and I'll introduce myself and I say, you know, I'm the architect, and, you know, more often than not, I would get that look of, oh, you know, that look of surprise. And so I that's something that, you know, felt good, you know, in a very positive way. And I think that is a situation where, you know, me being a Black architect and putting that on display, actually was a positive sign and a positive message for that particular community. I think that was very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, while some of these moments can be very negative or make us, want to curl up in a ball, there are moments where we're highlighted or celebrated. And I think Marilyn mentioned before that, she had moments in her career where she's awarded and she's put on a pedestal, but, we don't always want to think that alienation is negative, right? Because we are different. But I think all of us here on this panel can speak to the fact that when you present yourself to another person of color and you say, I'm an architect, or I'm an interior designer, or I'm a designer of any sort, and you see the light bulb go off, or you see the excitement in their eyes that you represent something that they could potentially be in the future, it's such a great feeling. You guys agree?
It's like representation. It really matters.
Yes.
It does. When someone see that, that they too can be, an architect or an interior designer, and they see themselves in you, it's like, it's a big thing for them,
Yeah, really matters. And so, Marilyn, you spoke recently about how you had a change in career and following your heart and going where you were supported. Can you talk to us more about that?
Sure. One of the things that I champion, and this stems from my Jamaican upbringing, is that, you shouldn't be afraid to go hard for yourself. I instill that in my kids. I instill that in, young designers that I mentor. You should absolutely celebrate yourself. And if you're not being served at the table, then you need to find another table. And that's exactly what I did. And not to say that my past firm is a bad firm. I just was not being fulfilled professionally. And, therefore I went on to another architectural firm where I feel now like, my skills are being recognized. I feel like there's now a path for me to grow. I feel more challenged. I have a manager who is mentoring me to, and he wants to see me grow. So, it's you have to make it personal, I feel. And you have to invest in yourself and seek out that someone or that organization that will invest in you, along, just to, give you what you need.
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate enough in my college career and also professionally to find support. My professors, Stephen Bender and Frank Bosworth, really encouraged us to go where we were going to flourish. And like Raymond spoke to, follow the people who invest in your professional and personal development, because those are the ones who are going to help you. You don't want to stay anywhere where you're going to remain stagnant. And so you want to go where you're going to grow. Chad, can you talk to us about how Black professionals in the AE industry, across disciplines, can become more involved with one another to feel empowered?
I think more than anything, it's an acknowledgement. I always get a little bit excited, for better or for worse, for when I see, others in other disciplines, engineering or construction, or even on the owner side. For example, I'm working with a guy on a project, and he's a project manager on the client or the owner side, and talking with him, we have, as professionals, Black professionals, we have this talk. We have a way of communicating with each other where we know what the other person is talking about. And so having that conversation about, how's it going, and are they treating you, and so on and so forth. So we're supporting each other without outwardly, coming out and saying it. So I think, everyone being doing the best that they can within their prospective career, or their prospective discipline, is a benefit not only for us but for the industry. And so seeing him being successful and doing great in what he's doing is helping me and inspiring me to do the same. So I think that's a way to that we can acknowledge.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And we're in a pandemic, right? A lot of things have gone remote. A lot of life has changed over the course of the last 6 months or so. And I find it interesting that my relationships with both Marilyn and Nicole sort of started virtually. And so I think another point here that we should, discuss and explore today is the impact of digital media and our ability to connect virtually. And so I think it's important that we say, we support one another when we're out in the field or when we're at design awards, but also when we're, posting our work online or sharing a story, or let's say a friend is looking for an interior designer and we say, well, I've got a friend, Marilyn. Even if we don't know the extent of Marilyn's work,
Yeah.
we can at least connect with her and find an opportunity for her to potentially have another client. Do you guys find that that's something you're exploring more now, more than ever?
So I think for me back home, I do a lot more referencing. Well, I had like 6 to 8 years working in between Barbados and here. And so I do a lot more referrals for persons across the industry. But there's this one question that I look forward to the day when I'm working here and it isn't asked of me. And this is from one Black professional to another. And so it'd be like, hey, how are you? Where you working? And then the question is, how many Black people are at the firm where you're working? So for me, I'm like, I want to be working long enough to see where that is a change. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't this question that is included in the catching up and just interfacing with other people of color within the industry. And so it's one of those things where the more we support each other, because there are some cases out there where there are people who are somewhat unqualified to do a task, but they know someone and they're like, oh, I know such and such. And so but I'm not saying to recommend anybody who can do the work. So for me, it is just like knowing what's out there, know what your peers are doing, as similar to what Chad is saying, just continuing to push each other forward, because like we really need to have each other's backs, because it can be pretty it's disheartening sometimes. But even in the meeting we had yesterday for NOMA Orlando, and when Tim is saying, the more, and social media has brought us to a place, and people say there are a lot of negatives in the pandemic, but I think one of the positives from the pandemic is even like these conversations and Zoom meetings where something might be happening in Miami or even on the West Coast, and I wouldn't have been able to participate. But now I can sit down from wherever I am, and like the world has forced us to kind of come together through technology to just have these conversations and to facilitate this gathering. So there are a lot of positives out of it.
From the guy who wanted to go back to life pre-Rona.
Yeah, that's the sports and, getting a good sweat, but.
Yeah, I get it. Marilyn, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, to Raymond's statement about, or question about, if someone asked him about how many Black people are at the firm, it's, you can't help but, when you walk into a meeting, you quickly scan the room and, how many of me are here, or even on the Zoom meetings nowadays, I'm the only one, so it's, you really can't help it. And I'm so glad that this forum is put together, because I would really love for us to change that.
Yeah.
So from my experience, you tend to see, especially at this level and in these types of professional industries, that you don't typically get, you on the whole, I won't say all, but on the whole, you get pretty high achieving, Blacks and minorities, just because of, especially in design, it's so cutthroat and so competitive that you have to really be, put yourself out there and be very good at what you do. And so something my wife says is that, you'll know that racism isn't a thing is when you see a mediocre Black man in a high power position. So I think at this level, when you see someone in a different industry, whether that's engineering or on owner side or interior design or whatever, it's a pretty good bet that they're going to be recommendable to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on empowerment, I know Nicole kind of in our conversations mentioned how I think both her and Marilyn spoke to sometimes being overlooked in meetings where, they're the ones presenting or they're the ones, who are leading these projects, and they're sometimes overlooked because they are a Black woman. And so Nicole spoke about the support she receives and the way she feels empowered by her partners. And I thought that was really great if you'd like to elaborate on that a bit more.
Yeah. I mean, there have been instances where I've, as you mentioned, been in meetings and I'm the project lead on the particular project, and the client will have interfaced with me a few times, but when my partners are in the room, they'll tend to look to them for the answer. So it can sometimes be disheartening, but I think it's something that my partners are slightly aware of, and very often we'll make sure that everybody's in on the conversation, making sure that people are aware that yes, it's a Black woman who's running the project and working very hard to make sure that your idea is coming to fruition. And
Yeah, it's awesome that you can find the empowerment from within, so you're not having to look to someone else at the table like, hey, can you kind of give me have my back here? Your teammates you've established this rapport, and all of you are equals, and I find that, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so Raymond, can you talk to us about ways that we can possibly encourage students to become more involved and connected to the AE industry?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's a matter of continuity, and we know that it is very cutthroat, it's very difficult in the industry. And if we can ensure that people of color all persons really who start architecture school, if we could make sure everyone who starts can finish, then we are in a really good place, because for undergrad, I would have been one of, say, about 100 to 110. And I think graduating, we had maybe 30 to 34.
Wow.
And so that's a huge drop-off rate. And for me, one of the things I would have been most passionate about by the time I got into grad school was ensuring that, as much as I could, provide some kind of support, some kind of guidance, and just try to keep these students in it as much as possible. And so there was the National Organization of Minority Architecture Students back at ISU, and I think that is probably one of the strongest student organization bodies within the College of Design. And it really went from about 2 to 2.5 odd years where Noel had started it back. And by the time I left, we had maybe 30 to 40 odd members. And within that time, the passion for design and the level of competence that was shown by the students, it took it from a place where here's this organization is now starting back up to a point where they're recognized. And I think there are two, I don't want to speak out, I think there are 2 student scholarships that are now available to NOMA students at ISU. And so we really have to be very rigorous to ensure that there is a framework that takes you from being a student all the way through to being a partner, the principal, and like the top person at whatever firm across whatever discipline it is. And we from internships, all of the different steps, we have to literally like write down like these are the actionable items that you expect, because without it, a lot of people could fall by the wayside, and it's not something that you really want to see.
Yeah. And I think, as we mentioned, the representation part matters most in these instances. We want to act as mentors and guides for the people who are underneath us to excel beyond where they currently are.
Mhm.
And so I'd like to ask Nicole again, sorry, I'm focusing on you, but we'll find other opportunities for everyone else to engage here too. Can you spotlight an organization for us that you are currently passionate about?
Yeah. I went to a community meeting for Creative Village, and I happened to meet this woman, Tony Crabtree, in the bathroom, and we just started casually talking about the extents of the project and the kind of transformation that'll occur within the neighborhood. And she told me that she was a part of New Image Youth Center in Paramore, and that's a group of individuals, of older individuals that mentor and provide a place for the students and children that live in Paramore to go after school, to either get support academically or just an outlet physically in terms of sports, or they provide opportunities to kind of study art and just a place for people to be and to hang, and a place that's constructive. So she told me that she actually has a program in place where she asks Black professionals to come in and kind of talk about what it is that they do on a daily basis, so that the students, which they range from 4 years old to seniors in high school. She asks Black professionals to come in and just kind of talk about what it is that they do on a daily basis. And I just happened to meet her at a community event. And that was something that I had always wanted to do. I think one of the greatest things that design has taught me is just exposure and research, the ability to kind of look deeper into a concept and kind of explore it, and design really exposed me to a lot of new things. And I think that that's important, that our youth know and get exposed to different avenues.
Absolutely.
And so I went there once and I kind of talked about architecture, and there are a few people there that were really intrigued by it. They, came up to me after and asked questions. And after that, I came back and kind of taught a SketchUp class. And so it's an organization that I'm really passionate about. And unfortunately, the pandemic has kind of put a little bit of space between us, but every now and again, I'll check in with the director and just see how everybody's doing. But I think, Raymond, you touched on this concept of creating a framework so that continuity can be successful and can be maintained and achieved. And I think that happens when people that are in certain positions go and just expand their reach and just let people know that there are faces out there that look like them. The potential is unlimited. And I don't know, that I'm really passionate about that organization.
We can see that your passion is showing through. And so that's New Image in Paramore for anyone who's looking to, potentially join them in their efforts. But I think, like Nicole mentioned,
she's a great director. So
okay. What was that?
Shantae Stubbs. She's the director and founder
Okay.
of the organization.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
But I think almost in addition to what we do professionally, it's almost like a requirement for us to also be exposed in other elements in our community. Like Nicole is mentioning, to act as this, you know, voice or the guide or the face for someone who is in a different situation that might not have the exposure. And I think all of us here participating in this can attest to that. So would anyone else like to discuss or describe for us something they're currently passionate about? Doesn't have to be architecture related, or maybe Marilyn, if you have something in the interior design world that we all should know about.
Well, not really in interior design, but one of my, I guess, pet peeves, if you will, is how can we go about like getting more in front of students, you know, from a young age. And I was reading a forum, I was reading comments. Instagram comments are always very funny. And you know, the topic was about, and it all stemmed from, you know, the whole George Floyd thing, and you know, and that led to discussions about, you know, diversity in this industry, and it was about diversity in the interior design industry. And someone mentioned about getting, you know, in touch with maybe like like young kids, middle school students, high school. And someone in the comments said, well, you can't force them to like interior design, or you can't force them to like architecture. And I didn't respond, but I said to myself, it's not about forcing them or making them like anything. It's making sure that they know that they have an opportunity. My goodness, like people need to know that, you know. And I would love for, you know, I don't know if New Image does this, but you know, just, you know, getting in front of these kids and just letting them know that they have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm off my soapbox now.
Mine is not an organization, but it is one of the most amazing courses that I've ever done in university. So at the University of Technology in Jamaica, there is CSP 1010. No student who is doing an undergraduate degree can complete their studies unless they take part in CSP 1010. And it's a community service program. And essentially all it is asking is that you choose from a list of all of these different organizations around the community, and you put in 40 hours. You get a little card, and so it's just this notion of understanding that there are people out there who are as fortunate as you, and that you have to give back. And so for me, I had chosen to go, and so there's two schools, primary and prep, and secondary and high school. And so it's a status thing where primary and secondary is government funded, and then prep and high school are for the more affluent persons within Jamaica. And so the opportunity was there for me to choose either the primary or the prep. So I went to primary school, and I was there for the majority of the year. So like I fill out the card and toss the card one side. I've met the requirements, but then I continue to go back, because just seeing someone who cares and someone who's taken an interest in like the students outside of who would have been their teachers, like the class that I was assigned to, and I was just assisting. I remember, because I was there long enough, so in many areas of the Caribbean, you wear uniform for school. And so there are two types of uniform. You wear like these shorts, or like a full overall for the women. And then when you get older up in school, you wear long pants and then a skirt and bodice. And so I remember just like randomly walking through Jamaica and I hearing, Mr. Nurse, Mr. Nurse. And I'm looking around, and this was maybe about 4 or 5 years after I had done the CSP 1010. And I'm looking around and I'm looking at these faces and I'm thinking to myself, why are these random Jamaican students who are seniors, like, why do they know me? And then they're like, oh, they tell me, you know, when I was at Mona Heights Primary School, they remember me from there coming into the class. And I mean, it warmed me up, but there really is a need. And this is the same framework. Like, if that could be included into curriculum of both undergrad and grad school, then there's a continuity, and there's a community and a culture that gives back, as well as taking something from the education system, and it can go a really long way.
I agree. Chad, do you have an organization you're currently passionate about, or can you think of one?
Yeah, I'm on the school board for Panelist Micro School, which is a charter school in St. Pete, Florida. It's a school primarily for what we call at promise students, and I've been on it for about 6 years now. And when I was first asked to do it, at that point I didn't have any experience in education or anything like that, and so it was. But to Marilyn's point, the reason why I agreed to do it was that, it was trying to get my face in front of them and allow them to see that, there is a path for them other than what they might see or what they're used to. So I started with that mentality, and over the years I've learned, I've gotten more and more involved, and I can speak more passionately and informed during the board meetings, but really the goal of mine, and it has been over the years, has been able to put myself in front of them and just see, just give them an image that they may not normally see. So I think they do really good things, and we're working with a group of students that are typically neglected by the school system. So I'm happy that we have the ability to give them the chance to, a second chance or a way to move up that they would not ordinarily have had.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so I think all of these are really amazing, organizations and moments that we can all attest to, like our contribution, but then the way that they also impact us positively. And so it's so easy to say, oh, we're doing this very good deed, but it's really a matter of, supporting ourselves and feeling empowered and giving back. And so this is my opportunity to shout out to BAM, which is Black Architects in the Making, started by Craig Akar in Miami. And, when Malcolm came to Orlando and said he was looking for people to help him develop a program that would create workshops for young Black children, I thought of that opportunity all while I was in grad school. I just didn't know the means or avenues how to. And so through that organization, we're now having these forums, and we're now meeting new people. And we've just really found a way to not only impact children and hopefully guide them, to new professions or encourage them to pursue new things, but just really to feel supported and loved and empowered in our community. And so we really want to encourage all of our participants to feel this way and follow their hearts and go where they're supported. And if you have any questions about any of the organizations we mentioned today, feel free to follow up with us after this conversation. But we just want you to recognize that there are firms and individuals and organizations that will, recognize you and your valued contribution to them. And we also just want you to understand that you're not alone. And hopefully these 4 amazing panelists today helped, bring awareness to the fact that we are better together and stronger together. And so, one thing I did want to add is don't be afraid to cold call or cold email people. If you're passionate about something, I mean, it's worth just exploring these different things. And so at this time, we would like to hear from you guys, the viewers, and we wanted to answer some of your questions that we have in our chat here. So let me take a look. I had a couple guided toward me. So let's see. Ooh, we've got some good ones. Okay. So the first one, as an employer, I've noticed that many Black architects have they undervalue their worth and compare to their white counterparts. Many are simply excited to get a job. How do we ensure that they are being paid equally and fairly? Ooh, that's a tough one.
Can I go, please?
Yeah, sure. Have it.
So, this thing about salary and worth, I have a very controversial take on it. And I think that if I don't know what someone is making, I don't know if the organization that they're in values them or not. And I could give an example, like I went to one of my interviews last year, a particular firm, they looked at me and they offered me about $17,000 a year less than what the range was that I know I should be making.
Yeah.
And so like I looked at them and I said, you know, I cannot accept that. But now the reality is, I am in a situation where I am not a national of America. And after finishing my schooling, I have 3 months between finishing school and starting work. If not, I pretty much have to pack up and head home. And so it puts me in a situation where there is not much wiggle room and there's not much room to maneuver. And I think that there are a lot of people out there, especially Black architects, who they might know their worth, but they might say, well, let me just kind of get my foot in the door, and you know, and then when I'm in the organization, I'm gonna try to build up. And so I think that like not knowing what other people are making, I think that is a huge disservice to being able to say, well, there's equity in earnings across any profession. And I know there are a lot of people, when I mention it at first, most people, well, here in America, they're like, oh no, you can't ask me how much I make. And I'm like, all right, cool. And so I'm like, but if you ask me, I don't have an issue saying, you know, or even like giving like a skill, because I want to know that, you know, this is what to expect should you be heading into an interview if you have 1 year experience, entry level, 10 years, or whatever the case may be. And so when I saw that question, I was like, huh, yeah.
So do you guys think it's controversial to know your worth and ask your peers what they're currently making?
No, you should always know your worth.
I agree. I
Go
think
hard for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I had professors even in college who encouraged us asking one another. And I know my first few years out of school when I was working professionally, I was highly underpaid. And not until I got smart and got over, you know, that ego, or like, you know, the question mentioned, you know, just feeling undervalued, I started questioning my peers, and I wanted to know, was there a gap between me being a woman or me being minority? And so I thought the only way I'll ever learn this is if I ask. And I tried to be, you know, polite about asking. I wouldn't just say like, how much do you make? But, you know, it's a conversation that needs to be happening in our peer group so that when we go to the next place, or when it's our time, we can ask for that promotion or ask for what we're worth.
Did you find that your peers were receptive and really open to sharing their salaries with you?
Some were, you know, because I mean, most of us had gone through school together. You spend almost 3 years of your life together. You go to bed at 3 a.m. and you wake up at 7 a.m. and you're all there together and you develop these relationships. So talking about finances is just another thing that you talk about. But, you know, you have the few who are reluctant, or they'll give you the ballparks. And so then you just have to assume, fine, I'll go on the high end, or, you know, I'll find the middle ground. But yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a millennial perspective.
Yeah, it may be. It's something I struggle with, and I've struggled with throughout my career. And part of it too is that I tend to not worry about money. I know it's a bad thing to say, but you know, I never had much growing up. So, you know, every step I take up is a step that is a height for me. But something I think I was struggling at and probably need to improve on myself is that I've always had the mentality that, if I do the best I can do, the money will take care of itself. And I know that is probably not shared by a lot of people, but I know one thing that, is something that everybody can respect, and that's the bottom line. And if you're helping that bottom line, then I think over time, you'll get taken care of. So that's kind of my view. And like I said, I go back and forth on that. It's something I struggle with and try to reevaluate as I move further in my career.
Well, everyone has different things that they value, and so there's no, reason for that. But if maybe you felt comfortable, you could ask your peers and hopefully bring that up to your employer. So let's see, we have another question here. Are any of the panelists tonight parents?
Excuse Briana?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, 1 second. So before we go on to the other question, someone had asked if the firm was interested in negotiation after I said that I couldn't take the lowball salary. So I told them that I wouldn't go any lower than what was the 48,000, which was the salary that I knew a lot of my fellow grad students from Iowa State University with just the architecture masters. I knew that they were getting that, and I told them like I wouldn't go any lower than that. And the next day, the firm was like, no, thank you. I was like, all right, cool. So yeah, I'm still here.
So again, go where you're supported.
Yeah, it's true.
Maybe that was just, not meant for you. It was meant for someone else. All right. So, and don't be afraid to negotiate. If you need help with that, I'm sure everyone here has had some practice. Let's see. So the next question was, are any of the panelists tonight parents?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Chad.
Yeah, I have a 4-year-old Trenton and a 3-year-old Cairo.
Awesome.
And 2 boys, and they have a lot of energy and very rambunctious, and love them to death. It's a struggle in the industry though, because as architecture is not an 8 to 5 type of job. So
yeah,
it's something that you're constantly doing. If it's not working late, it's going to meetings and going to preparing for presentations, so on and so forth. So it's a balance that you have to strike, and something I strive hard to do, so that they see that I'm present and active in their life, but at the same time be able to perform and do the thing I need, things I need to do to make sure that they're provided for. So I think oftentimes what I do, in fact, what ends up being my most productive hours are early morning, like 5 to 7, when I'm not answering emails or calls and they're asleep. So, so that it's just trying to strike a balance, and that's evolving. It was different when they were babies. Now that they are toddlers and small kids, it's that dynamic's kind of evolving. So, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that was actually the second part of the question was, can you talk about the struggle of balancing parenting and the pressures of work? And I know while I don't have children, like you said, architecture, and I'm sure, Marilyn, you feel this with interior design, you're having to make selections and client calls late in the evening, but you're often expected to be on all the time. Now that we've gone virtual, it's been emphasized even greater. But I found a rule for me is just having a certain time, unless there's a deadline or something that's, truly, required at the time. I just have a time frame when I'm like, okay, it's X time, and this is now family time, or this is now dinner time, and I will not be checking my computer. I will fully close the screen down. I will allow myself to disconnect from this and have a moment with my family, have a moment with my boyfriend, with my friends, and just separate from always being on. So I found that useful in balancing, although I don't have children. And so Chad, kudos to you for doing it all.
Yeah, and that's a good point. What I try to do is, if I am kind of like to your point, if I am dedicating this time to them, then I won't check emails, I won't take calls, that type of thing. I know that there are hours that I have to work and I have to get stuff done. So I'll, wait until then to kind of do those things. But while I'm in the presence of them, I try to, put work to the side, even though it's hard, especially when you're going after a pitch or, you got a, crazy client email or something and it's, the front of your mind. But, like I said, it's something that is a balance and something that I still constantly, evolving and trying to manage.
That's awesome. So, I mean, our chat is kind of blowing up. It's interesting that conversations that happen while we're also having conversations. So I'm just taking a peek here. Raymond mentioned that he did negotiate. We have Rebecca who mentioned that, Rebecca Talbert, she said, I'm mid-career and I'm really open about what I make. I teach women in the profession how and why to negotiate, but find my peers are often, reluctant to share salary info. I can personally attest that I've heard Rebecca shares her insight on salary and has resources as well. She said, transparency empowers everyone. I've also interviewed someone and after discovering they were grossly underpaid, I reached out and told her what she should be making. And so this is another way that we can support one another by just bringing to light what you should be making. I know in my past, I've told friends, hey, you're being grossly underpaid and this is what we're all making, because you don't want to see the person who's putting in all the effort not be valued for that.
Yeah.
And so,
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question to Nicole? Since you have your own firm, does that mentality or that thinking ever kind of go into what you charge for a project or how you write a proposal for a project?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, we're a new firm. We'll be 2 years old in October. So often when we're writing proposals, we'll develop a number based off of the project criteria and shoot for that number and send that proposal out. Sometimes we'll need to negotiate, but for the most part, we'll get the number that we're after. Internally, we're all equal partners, and the notion of our finances are all very much shared between the three of us. And I don't know if I answered your question specifically.
No, that makes sense. I just was thinking, is there any, as we go to negotiate, salaries for a job, I was wondering if that, plays into, your thinking in terms of what you ask for when you're doing a proposal for a project. So yeah, you answered it.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question here from, let's see, it asks, has anyone in this group, in this profession, worked in other parts of the country? If so, do you feel working in this industry in southern states drastically increased some of the race-related challenges?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Do we have any?
I have to think about that one. See,
Yeah.
I lived in Boston for a while. I grew up there, and I've had a project in Boston, and while there's differences between the North and the South, of course, I don't think there's anything overtly, different in terms of, increase in race-related challenges. I haven't noticed any. I haven't experienced any at all.
I think because we live in Florida, maybe we have a different perception, because Florida is it's an anomaly. It's the most southern state, but I mean,
it's also a mix, right?
It is. Yeah, we're pretty diverse here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I find that when you go into the truly southern states, which are north of Florida, like let's say like Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, I've done some work with clients there, and I think that there is a difference. Let's say with my clients in Seattle, or on the West Coast, who might be less conservative and less vocal about certain things, and you learn in this profession how to deal with all sorts of people, but there is sometimes when it's very apparent that you're dealing with a client or maybe just an individual, not necessarily the client per se, but an
Right.
individual in that group who thinks a certain way, and they might make a comment or, you know, make a glare, and you just got to keep moving forward.
I think Florida is. I've done enough projects throughout the state. There's a difference, you know, depending on what part of the state that you are, and I can't say that there's any, you know, particular instance that I've experienced some sort of racism or even just the feeling of it, but it's you know, you can tell there's a different kind of sense in the air. I went to school in St. Louis, and part of the curriculum at my school was to kind of study the architecture of St. Louis and the surrounding areas. And one of the things I realized is that St. Louis is so segregated, and just, you know, the way that people live and the way they interact, that if you're doing architecture there, I can't imagine that that's not something that will be at the forefront of what you're doing, just because it's so overt just in everyday life. So architecture, I think, would be a product of that.
Interesting. You should go back and do some research into that. Maybe take some of your students and that be one of your projects.
Right.
Yeah. And so, you know, I want to kind of give some, oh, there's another question. Should we do one more? Let's see. Regarding juggling children and working, I hear from many emerging professionals who don't have children that they feel the expectation to work extra hard or work more than their colleagues with kids. Those kids often have hard stops from meetings, work due to like being caretakers of parents themselves. And some young professionals feel like the same courtesy is not extended to them because they don't have the same excuse. Since most of the panelists aren't parents, can they discuss this topic or share insights for emerging professionals when they feel like they are put in these positions?
Well, I would, with regards to that question, I would encourage you to open up a dialogue with your counterparts and colleagues that do have children, and because the assumption, things are not always as they appear. I worked at a firm where I talked very frequently with my mentor about kids and when to have kids and what changes with regards to your profession when you do have children. And she was very open and transparent. She says, you know, you do see me leave at 6 p.m., but what you don't know is that I cook dinner, and then I get my kid ready for bed, and then from, you know, 8 till 2 a.m. I'm working still, and I may be working from home. So I guess with regards to that question, it's a good one because, you know, I think people operate from the perspective that they know. But I would encourage you to open up a dialogue with your peers at the firm that do have children and just discuss, you know, how do you manage? Because you might find that they're working just as much as you are, if not more, you know.
Yeah, I think it's easy. Like we mentioned our lens earlier, right? Like it's easy to perceive it as one way when it may be different.
And to build on what Nicole has said, like the reality is, it is even more difficult now since the pandemic, because you have a lot of people working from home, and especially there are a lot of single mothers out there that they have to now balance a full work day while having this reality that, you know, like my child or my children are also here to be taken care of. And so I think that within the industry and just across the board, a lot of conversations really are necessary to ensure that there isn't like just like a drain and too much of a burden on like the new way of life on many parents out there. Because like I am not a parent, but I for my sanity, funny enough, so for my sanity, twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, my lunch hour is dedicated to coaching one of my good friends, her daughter. And so she's 6 years old. I coach her field hockey and football. Well, global football, not the S word. And so the way how it is, like, that is my chance to be physically active, and is also the chance to just give a bit of relief during the day for her mother, because I know how difficult it is. And so we can try to ensure that these things are kind of spoken about and out there a lot more. Sorry, a comment came through from the mother. She's on the she's here watching. Yeah, so we can be in a situation where we can put ourselves out there a bit more to help people. And it does also come back to just being aware and cognizant of what others are going through. And so can we tweak our lens to see life through someone else's perspective without living their life? And so, hey.
And that's
so
exactly
true.
what we're all here for, right? Like, we're here to support one another, especially those who, you know, may not look like us, or they haven't had the same experiences. Like, this is what this forum is for, and this is why we're all joining here tonight. So we just want to encourage everyone who watched this evening to, like, follow your heart and go where you're supported. And, you know, I would like to give you guys, you know, closing remarks this evening. If you have anything else you'd like to say or tell our viewers out there.
I think I've spoken enough, but you go ahead. You go
Marilyn,
ahead,
why don't you start us off?
I guess my parting advice to anyone, you know, young designers or architects watching, and, you know, you feel alone or you feel discouraged, you know that we're here to support you. Know that there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with, you know, seeking support, going where you're needed, going where you feel welcomed, going where you will get that mentorship, you know, to grow into the position or whatever it is that you need. And that support can come from, you know, your family, your peers, just, you know, just all you have to do is reach out. Just reach out, because we are here to help you.
And to kind of follow up with that, we all went to design school, and we know the power of iteration and repetition. And I found that through the pandemic and certain social events that have opened my peers' eyes to certain injustices, conversation is critical, regardless of race. And conversation is necessary. And conversation can be clunky when it's not practiced often. So my I guess parting words of wisdom, if you want to call it that, is iteration and continuing to have the conversation, even if you may not say the right thing in the first time and the second time and the third, but approaching a space and a scenario with kind of open eyes, open heart, and open perspective, that in itself creates support, and that in itself creates a space where everybody can operate stronger together. And that's,
I love that. Steven called you the sage. You like that advice.
I think I don't have words of wisdom, but more words of gratitude, and that is to BAM Orlando. And one of the things that we talked about, especially when we first met, is how isolated we felt at times in this industry. And I'm thankful for the work that they're doing, because it's allowing us to see that it's great to see, you know, people with the same perspective that I have, and the same struggles, and it's nice to know that we can lean on each other for that support. One of the, this hasn't been a great year, as everybody knows. One of the great things that's come of this is the fact that we are able to have these conversations. We've taken a time out from the normal hustle and bustle of everyday life to have these conversations, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful to be a part of it.
That's so true. I mention to my mom often, it took a pandemic for a lot of us to really open our eyes and start, being real. Raymond?
For me, I just gonna say, going forward, and it's something I just try to practice every day. Just be kind, like you don't know what anyone else is going through, and you don't need to know to just look at someone, just see people for who they are, and just keep it moving. It really isn't that difficult to do. And it's something that if we across the board, like if we practice it, a lot of the division and a lot of the issues and the hesitance we have to have these conversations, like it goes away, and it makes it like you could ask most of the people who know me from the time I could talk to now. Like the reality is that I will speak to anybody once we speak the same language, and even if we don't, I still kind of try to pick here and there. And so we just need to do better and just be kinder as people, and where you can help out somebody else, just help them out.
Yeah.
And like that's all anybody's asking.
Yeah. Empathy is a real big thing when we can kind of look outside ourselves to help someone else. And so, we must all do our part in creating real change, and through this meaningful dialogue tonight, you can see that, we're really committed to this purpose and doing so with action. We're connecting here in this space, but also hopefully once we're able to join and gather in person, we can then meet again and work with one another to continue building upon these great relationships we've now developed. And so we ask that you join us next time on our series as we continue cultivating this platform that embraces diversity and inclusion in the industry. And follow us at bam.orlando and look for future dates there for our next panel. And I just want to thank our panelists for this evening. You guys were wonderful. It's been so great getting to know you. And thank you to our viewers for watching and staying with us till 8:30 this evening. I'm sorry, but everyone have a great evening, and thanks again for joining us.